You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Data sovereignty refers to the principle that information is subject to the laws and governance structures of the country or jurisdiction where it is stored or processed. This concept matters because data rarely exists in isolation. It moves across borders through cloud providers, networks, and distributed systems. When sensitive information is stored in another country, that country's laws may grant authorities access or impose unique obligations on its handling. For example, customer data stored in a European data center is governed by EU privacy laws, regardless of the nationality of the company managing it. Sovereignty highlights the inseparability of data from its physical location. Jurisdictional differences create complexity in privacy protections, law enforcement access, and regulatory obligations. Some regions, like the European Union, impose strong privacy protections and require explicit justification for data use. Others may prioritize national security and grant law enforcement broad rights to access stored data. For instance, U.S. law enforcement can compel cloud providers under the Cloud Act to disclose data, even if hosted abroad. Such variations mean organizations must understand the implications of storing or processing information in each jurisdiction. Ignoring these differences can lead to compliance violations, reputational damage, or conflicts with customer expectations. Geolocation affects encryption, key custody, and cross-border access decisions. While encryption can protect data technically, legal requirements often extend to key management. If keys are held in a jurisdiction with expansive government access laws, encryption may provide less assurance. For example, storing encrypted data in one country while managing keys in another may raise questions about control and compliance. Geolocation also influences whether organizations allow administrators from different regions to access systems. By carefully considering where both data and keys reside, organizations ensure encryption serves as a meaningful protection rather than a symbolic measure. Export controls add another layer of complexity by restricting the movement of certain types of data across borders. Governments often impose rules on sensitive technologies, intellectual property, or defense-related information. For instance, U.S. export controls under ITAR restrict how defense technical data can be transferred internationally, even to subsidiaries of the same company. These controls mean that not all data can freely flow across global infrastructures. Organizations must recognize when export restrictions apply, ensuring that sensitive datasets do not violate international trade laws or expose them to penalties. Cloud architectures often define provider regions and zones as mechanisms to manage compliance with sovereignty requirements. Regions are geographically distinct data center clusters, while zones provide redundancy within those regions. For example, an organization may select an AWS region in Frankfurt to meet German residency requirements, ensuring that workloads remain within EU boundaries. By selecting regions carefully, businesses can align technical deployments with legal obligations. However, organizations must validate that provider practices, such as metadata storage, logging, or backups, also remain compliant, as sovereignty applies to all layers of data management. Data sovereignty also impacts backup, replication, and disaster recovery planning. Organizations often replicate data across regions for redundancy, but doing so may violate residency rules. For example, replicating Canadian health data into U.S. data centers for disaster recovery could contravene Canadian privacy laws. Sovereignty constraints require designing recovery systems that honor geographic boundaries, even if that limits redundancy. This means organizations must weigh resilience against compliance, often relying on regional providers or cloud zones that allow localized recovery within the same jurisdiction. Localization costs and operational trade-offs emerge when enforcing residence rules. Restricting data to a single jurisdiction may reduce flexibility and increase costs, as organizations cannot take advantage of global infrastructure efficiencies. For instance, requiring all customer data to remain in-country may increase latency for international users or limit available cloud services. These constraints may also complicate workforce models, as employees in other regions may be unable to access systems. Balancing sovereignty with performance and cost efficiency becomes a constant negotiation in global organizations seeking to remain compliant while still competitive. Inventorying and mapping data locations is a critical discipline for sovereignty. Organizations must know not only where primary datasets are stored, but also where backups, logs, and derived datasets reside. Logical storage, such as cloud object buckets, must be tied to physical regions to ensure compliance. For example, metadata may be stored outside declared regions, creating hidden risks. Mapping both physical and logical data flows provides transparency and supports audits. Without accurate inventories, organizations cannot verify compliance with residency requirements or assess risks tied to sovereignty obligations. Risk-based approaches help organizations manage cross-border transfers and access in practical ways. Instead of outright prohibiting transfers, businesses assess the sensitivity of the data, the legal environment of the destination country, and available technical safeguards. For example, anonymizing customer identifiers before transferring datasets internationally may reduce exposure. Risk-based methods acknowledge that global operations require some cross-border data movement, but aim to minimize risks through encryption, tokenization, or aggregation. This pragmatic stance allows compliance while still enabling business functionality across diverse geographies. Ultimately, geolocation decisions must balance legal requirements, security priorities, and business needs. Overemphasizing compliance may create inefficiencies, while ignoring regulations exposes organizations to fines and reputational harm. For example, an e-commerce company may want global replication for performance but must respect GDPR restrictions on EU citizen data. Governance processes must weigh all factors: jurisdictional rules, encryption practices, performance needs, and costs before deciding where data should reside. Sovereignty is not merely a legal obligation, but an architectural consideration that shapes how modern organizations manage and protect information. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Contracts and service-level agreements, SLAs, are powerful tools for enforcing data locality. Well-written clauses specify where data can be stored, how it may be replicated, and under what conditions provider personnel may access it. For example, a cloud vendor may agree in writing that customer records remain within a European region, and that only staff located in the EU can perform maintenance. SLAs also define remedies if commitments are broken, such as financial penalties or termination rights. By embedding sovereignty requirements into contracts, organizations ensure providers are legally bound to respect geographic constraints. Encryption and key custody arrangements are equally important for limiting provider access across jurisdictions. Even when data is stored in a foreign country, strong encryption prevents unauthorized viewing if the provider does not control the keys. Customers can manage keys themselves through on-premises hardware or cloud-hosted key management systems. For example, a business may store encrypted files in a US-based cloud but retain keys exclusively in a European data center. This ensures compliance with EU rules while still leveraging global services. Key custody creates a clear boundary of control, shifting authority from the provider back to the organization. Data transfer mechanisms and legal instruments govern how organizations move information across borders while remaining compliant. Instruments like standard contractual clauses, SCCs, binding corporate rules, or adequacy decisions provide legal pathways for cross-border data flows. For example, an adequacy decision by the EU allows transfers to countries deemed to have equivalent privacy protections. These mechanisms create legal assurances where technical measures alone are insufficient. Conceptually, they recognize that while data must flow for global commerce, those flows must remain under agreed frameworks that balance business needs with individual rights. Incident response becomes more complex when data is stored in foreign jurisdictions. Legal requirements for breach notifications, regulator engagement, and evidence handling vary across countries. For example, a breach involving European data may require notification within 72 hours under GDPR, while the same event in another jurisdiction may have different timelines. Additionally, accessing logs or forensic data across borders may require coordination with foreign authorities. Organizations must design response plans that respect these jurisdictional differences, ensuring that sovereignty does not delay containment or compliance during high-pressure incidents. Audit and compliance evidence are essential to proving residency controls are being honored. Regulators and auditors often require documentation that data has not left approved regions. This may include system logs, provider attestations, or independent audit reports. For example, a healthcare provider subject to HIPAA may need proof that patient data remains within U.S. facilities. Without evidence, even if data technically stays local, organizations may fail audits or lose certifications. Collecting and maintaining clear evidence ensures organizations can demonstrate not only intent, but verifiable adherence to residency obligations. Cross-border analytics present a unique challenge, as organizations often want to aggregate datasets globally for insight while respecting local compliance. Strategies include anonymization, which removes identifiers entirely, or aggregation, which consolidates data into summary statistics before transfer. For example, instead of transferring raw health records internationally, a company may aggregate them into regional trends. Pseudonymization can also allow useful analysis while limiting exposure. These approaches enable organizations to extract value from data while minimizing legal and privacy risks, preserving both innovation and compliance. Vendor selection must consider sovereignty capabilities as a critical criterion. Providers differ in the number of regions offered, their contractual flexibility, and their compliance certifications. For instance, one vendor may provide data centers in-country, while another requires cross-border replication. Organizations should evaluate providers not only on cost and performance, but also on their ability to enforce residency and sovereignty. Selecting a vendor aligned with legal and regulatory needs reduces long-term risk and ensures sovereignty is integrated into the organization's technology stack from the outset. Replication and failover design must also respect residency constraints. While redundancy across multiple regions strengthens resilience, it may violate sovereignty rules if replicas cross borders. For example, a Canadian financial institution may need to design failover entirely within Canada, even if this reduces global disaster recovery options. Cloud providers often allow customers to restrict replication to specific regions, but organizations must configure systems accordingly. Designing sovereignty-aware failover plans balances business continuity with compliance, ensuring resilience does not come at the cost of legal violations. Monitoring access patterns helps detect unauthorized cross-border access attempts. Even when data is properly stored, administrators or systems may inadvertently or maliciously pull information across boundaries. For example, an engineer working remotely outside the approved jurisdiction might attempt to access restricted datasets. Monitoring tools can flag such activity, enforcing geographic restrictions through alerts or automated blocking. Without monitoring, cross-border violations may go unnoticed until discovered by regulators. By actively watching for unauthorized access, organizations ensure sovereignty is not just designed into systems, but also enforced in real time. Governance processes formalize the approval of international data movement, ensuring that business, legal, and security leaders weigh in before decisions are made. Requests for transfers should be documented, risk-assessed, and approved through structured workflows. For example, a marketing department requesting to share customer datasets with a foreign subsidiary must seek approval, documenting safeguards like anonymization or encryption. Governance prevents ad hoc decisions that bypass protections, ensuring sovereignty requirements remain consistently applied. Structured approval processes bring accountability and traceability into global data management. Periodic reviews are essential, as laws and treaties evolve constantly in the international landscape. What is legal today may not be compliant tomorrow if treaties expire or new privacy frameworks emerge. For instance, the invalidation of the EU-US Privacy Shield Agreement forced many organizations to reassess their transfer mechanisms. Periodic reviews of contracts, data flows, and provider practices ensure organizations remain aligned with current law. Regular updates prevent sovereignty programs from becoming outdated, reducing the risk of sudden non-compliance triggered by shifting legal landscapes. Ultimately, data sovereignty must be treated as an operational constraint, not just a legal afterthought. It shapes architecture, contracts, incident response, and even vendor selection. By embedding sovereignty into the design of systems and workflows, organizations can operate confidently across global landscapes without violating local laws. Balancing sovereignty with security and business efficiency requires discipline, but it is essential in today's interconnected world. Organizations that integrate sovereignty into planning avoid last-minute compliance scrambles, turning a potential obstacle into a predictable, managed part of their cybersecurity program. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.